free trade agreement, and it's for that reason why it's important. And perhaps I would like to start by welcoming our panelists, and I will let them introduce themselves shortly after I've done, my opening statement. Now, why are we doing this? We as a firm decided during the height of the lockdowns during 2020 to take legal education online. And we effectively decided to set up a neutral product like Legal Webinars Inc. instead of doing it as a firm. The reason being that we wanted to be able to tap into the expertise of not only our associates, but also of our competition wherever they may be around the world. So we deemed it fit to create a platform for dialogue. And the reason the legal webinars is actually based on three pillars. The first pillar is virtual legal training in the workplace, which we do as a firm. The second pillar is industry expertise and industry development in terms of discussing industry-specific, topics. We've had in the past, 8 to 9 months or so, this is our 10th webinar today. And we're very excited about that, of course. And we've just seen the numbers growing with every webinar, and that's because we have perfected the art over the past few months. The third leg of legal webinars is basically to encourage intra-Africa trade and to therefore have dialogue around how to, accelerate trade amongst African nations. Just for background, and if you want to understand why we're doing this, the first reason is because we all know of the introduction of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, which effectively, creates a common union between the African countries, which is a big milestone. The AfCFTA as the umbrella agreement is underpinned by a number of different agreements and annexures, which need to find life of their own in order for the agreement to be effective. Rules of origin is one of the chapters and the annexes of the agreement. And as I've said, for those of you who are new to the topic, we are effectively talking rules of origin, which means the passport of where a product comes from and how that product, will enjoy, specific benefits depending on where it lands and so forth. So that's what rules of origins are about. And for me as a trade lawyer, I am very passionate about simplifying the law and making sure that, entrepreneurs and business people out there are able to focus on managing and running their businesses, and to make sure that people who have, an understanding of how the trading system works are there to assist them to as I said, accelerate intra-Africa trade. So thank you very much. This is it's not a lecture; it's a seminar. So it's highly participative. We would like everyone to kick off their shoes, feel at home, grab a coffee, grab a water, whatever makes you happy, and let's engage. So how we're going to do this is that we have three panelists. Our panelists, the first one is Ms. Unami Tlole, who is based in Botswana. She will introduce herself shortly. Then we have Ms. Sandra Chihaka, who is from Zimbabwe. And of course, we have Mr. Sham. He corrected us earlier, being not from the Francophone countries. We were actually busy calling him Cam. But thank you, Sham, for correcting us. And of course, he is, part of the Shipping Council in Cameroon and also an international trade lawyer. So Unami, being, passionate about teaching and all of that, I asked her to basically lay the ground for us and, unpack really what the rules of origin are for everyone. And, so that's what she will do. Sandra will speak about it from a customs perspective in terms of how this actually works at, when you're crossing the border. And of course, Cam will give us, his perspective as an international trade lawyer, and particularly because he's from a Francophone country as well. So I think, colleagues, one of the things that we still have to deal with as Africa, notwithstanding the execution of the AfCFTA, is that we still are completely far apart from each other in terms of our legislative environment. We have Francophone countries who use the French, legal system. We have, countries in SADC, which are mainly former British colonies who use the common law legal system. And of course, a combination of other laws. So we really have a lot of work to do in terms of harmonizing, all of these legislations in the various countries, and of course, making sure we come up with common, harmonized, rules of engagement, so that everybody knows what the rules are. Everybody knows what is expected of them, and by doing that, we will be able to remove the bottlenecks that inherently constrain trade amongst nations. So, without any further ado, I'm going to ask Unami, to introduce herself. Just introduce herself. Just tell us why we should listen to you. That's what I normally say. You want to know why you should listen to someone. So tell us, please, Unami, and maybe after you can go for it, Sandra, and then Sham can also go for it, and then after that, Unami, we will move on with your presentation. Welcome once again. Thank you for donating your time, and this, I believe, is important for us as Africans to talk about things and to break down the barriers. So thank you. Unami, you may proceed. Thanks.
Thank you, Ron. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, according to your time zones. So, like he has already introduced me, my name is Unami Klole. I'm a rules of origin expert. I've been in this field for more than 9 years. I'm a trainer accredited by the World Customs Organization as an expert trainer on rules of origin. I'm also a teacher, qualified teacher. I hold a certificate in education. So don't be amazed when I now start making raise your hands visually. Anyways, yes, I work with trade agreements in Botswana, our SADC, our SACU, the regional ones, the continent one. I was also part of the delegation of Botswana negotiations for rules of origin in the technical team. And I also had a privilege to serve for almost 1 year at the African Union under the AFCFTA support unit. So today I'm going to tell the rules of origin story, and then we'll continue to hear about the rules of origin. It's a very, very long story, about 245 pages, but anyways, I'm joking. So we will definitely going to have fun and learn about rules of origin. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Unami. Sandra?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Sandra Chihaka from Zimbabwe. I have 16 years working experience as a customs officer, and 6 of these years under rules of origin. So tonight I promise to lead you through rules of origin from a customs perspective. Thank you very much for sparing your time to listen to us.
Thank you so much, Sandra. Thank you so much. Sham?
Yeah, thank you, Mwazi. It's a pleasure coming in from Cameroon. I am Cham Etienne Bama, Trade Policy Advisor and Deputy Director for International Trade at the Cameroon National Shippers Council, and as well advisory member with the African Council on Trade and Tourism, advisory board member and committee chair on AFCFTA at the Pan-African Women Business Leaders Association, and head of policy at Enabling Africa Trade Forum. So this variety of caskets in the trade industry are a coronation of 10 years of practice and theory. I've been in the industry since 2011, and across the continent, we've worked on the trade issues. And last week, we were at the AFCF Secretariat to build a partnership in supporting the implementation process. So on the ground, I have been living rules of origin all my life. And it was with great satisfaction that I saw the AFCFTA rules of origin consider some of the challenges we at the council were very worried about the implementation process of the AFCFTA. So it will be a great opportunity for us to discuss on the practical issues regarding shippers' use of rules of origin. and how we as a council comes in to build their capacity for them to be able to analyze rules of origin during the production phase so as to qualify when they meet custom officials as Sandra at the border. Thank you.
Thank you so much, colleagues. I'm really, really excited about this. Now, Unami, I'm going to hand over to you now, and we're really interested in hearing the story about rules of origin. So please take us on your journey, Unami. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. Do I share the screen or?
Yes, the screen is shared already, so you may just proceed. Oh, did you want to share it yourself, Unami?
I think it would be better that way to control it from this side.
Okay, Albert, are you able to help with that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you so much. Are you able to load it, Unami?
Yes, I'm getting it. Let's
Okay.
just a minute.
Right. Okay, thank you.
There we are.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Perfect.
Okay. All right. I'm audible enough?
Yes, yes, you may proceed, Unami.
Thank you very much, Ron. Today we are going to tell a story on understanding rules of origin and their impact on trade facilitation in African countries. So we will move like this. First and foremost, we're going to deal with the session content. How are we going to be moving? So we're going to move like this. We will have the overview of rules of origin, and then we have rules of origin within Africa, rules of origin for the AFCFTA, and then the impact of rules of origin on trade facilitation in Africa, possible mitigation measures within the existing legal framework, which is some recommendations there. What are rules of origin? That's the big question. What are rules of origin? Rules of origin are rules and regulations that determine the economic nationality of goods in international trade. As we are all aware, even us as human beings, we have our identity. We have where we belong. We have a country where we belong to. So same goes with goods. That cup that you're drinking your coffee on, it has its country of origin. The chair that you're sitting on, the gadget that you are watching us on, it has its country of origin. It's made somewhere. So, rules of origin, they're in two kinds. We have the non-preferential rules of origin and the preferential rules of origin. I'll get to elaborate as we go. So today, what we'll be more talking about is the preferential rules of origins, which we normally find in free trade agreements like the AFCFTA. So the non-preferential rules of origin, they are the ones that give us our policy measures, the trade statistics, our origin marking. Whenever you see something on something that you buy, it's made in South Africa, it's made in Ghana. Those are origin markings that are determined by the non-preferential rules of origin. So the general purpose of rules of origin is to gather statistics, that is non-preferential rules of origin. Origin marking and labeling still falls under non-preferential rules of origin. Administration of control measures in international trade, Now we talk about our anti-dumpings, our trade remedies. So these are the non-preferential rules of origin that now are going to allow us to discriminate those goods non-preferentially, not for elimination of duties. For elimination of duties, now we talk about the preferential rules of origin. We're talking money, where we eliminate our duties. So definitely we have to know whether the goods that we are according preferential treatment are qualified to enjoy that incentive. The purpose of preferential rules of origin, what is the purpose? Why do we have to have these FCFTA rules of origin, SADC rules of origin, EAC rules of origin, all these type of rules of origin that we have? Why should we have them? One, they aim at boosting industrialization and intra-regional trade. Encourage us to trade with each other, isn't it? They are the basis to counter trade deflection and transshipment in the FTA. We don't want a situation whereby you now enjoy the preferential treatment by bringing goods that don't belong to the preferential setup. And then you enjoy your duties. It's not allowed. So the rules of origin are set up for that reason. And there are the basis for us to give you the treatment, the preferential treatment that is free duty or quota free. What are the common principles of drafting rules of origin? Yeah, now that is where we come in legal. Legal people now, this is the setup of drafting the principles of rules of origin. We start by origin criteria. We also have the conditions to qualify under each criterion, where you find our wholly obtained, our sufficiently worked. We also have to have a provision that is speaking to insufficient working and processing, not conferring origin. We also have other provisions like accumulation that enable us to have value chains, to move goods from another country and deem them to be originating within the state parties that are in that agreement. So we continue with the common principles. We have the principle of territoriality. We know that it happens that goods can move from the territory of preferential treatment to a third party. But in this provision, now we are going to tell you that when these goods are in that third party, they should be under customs supervision and nothing should change on that goods except for preservation purposes. So that's where the principle of territoriality come in. And we also have another flexibility, which is the tolerance rule, where we say that even if you have not qualified, but you can allow a little bit of the third party material to a certain percentage. Normally it will be 10 to 15%. It depends on the agreement setup. We also have units of qualification. Now here we are talking about our harmonized systems, the classification, how we're going to treat the units as they come in under origin status. And then we have accessories, spare parts and tools. And then we have sets. We have neutral elements, our power, fuels, the ones that we use for manufacturing. So we have to speak to them in the legal documents that how are we going to be treating them? Are we going to be including them when we calculate our value addition, or they are excluded? So that those are the principles of drafting rules of origin. Now, going back to that principle, you remember I talked about the origin criteria. Yes. The origin criteria, universally, we have two types of dealing with it. We have the goods that criteria that says, the criterion that says that the goods should be wholly obtained, goods that are found occurring in that, naturally in that country. An animal born and raised in that country, vegetables harvested in that country. So those are wholly obtained goods criterion. Then we have another one. As we all know that they say that no man is an island. So even with goods, no good is an island. So they will definitely have to have some traces somehow of some parts of raw materials that are not from the region. So how do we deal with them? Now we do what we call sufficiently worked or processed. And under this process, we have the value addition rule, which is almost what we can talk about. We can say it's a domestic content, the addition that you have made in your country. And then we have non-originating material content. Now is the threshold of how much are we going to allow that is coming from outside the agreement, the state parties. Remember, for example, if you are dealing with the AFCFTA, we are now talking about from the goods that are coming from SADC that are not part of the AFCFTA. Let me bring it closer to home. You know, you have your SADC agreement and you have your AFCFTA. So if the good is qualifying under SADC, it doesn't necessarily mean it will qualify under AFCFTA. So you should differentiate that. They have their own set of rules that govern them, just like any other country that has its own set of rules of governing the movement of people. You get to the border, they say, can I have passport? Oh, you need a visa. Can I have passport? No, you don't need a visa, you can go through. So there are some arrangements, same with goods, they have the same arrangements. So we are going now to talk about the rules of origin within Africa. What a beautiful picture. You see how we overlap. You find out that Botswana is in SACU and also in SADC and soon will be AFCFTA. You know, we have overlapping membership. So in all this overlapping membership, it means that we have different sets of rules of origin. That's why we need the AFCFTA. So rules of origin within Africa, like I've already mentioned, Africa has its own spaghetti bowl. The rules of origin agreed in regional and sub-regional. They are not the same. They might be close to each other, but one or two things are not the same. Under AU recognizes about 8 regional economic communities. That's what the word REC stands for. So these are the, as mentioned, we have our COMESAs, our EAC, our ECOWAS, SADC, just like that. And all these member states, they have overlapping memberships in the regional groupings. Now we're bringing the AFCFTA, it means that it's also going to be another overlapping because it's still an FTA, is not a customs area. So, talk about the AFCFTA rules. Yes, I'll touch base with the AFCFTA rules, although this webinar is not solely for AFCFTA, but we have to talk to AFCFTA because it's the new kid in the block, isn't it? So AFCFTA rules of origin, they were drafted under the following objectives. These are the objectives that you find in Annex 2 on rules of origin of the AFCFTA. To deepen market integration at regional and continental level. Try to deepen that our working together as Africans, to boost intra-Africa trade, to promote regional and continental value chains. You know, we have our own continental value chains to move from and just moving around ourselves. So, and also to foster economic transformation to the continent. Industrialization, when you speak industrialization, now we talk about employment for our youth, employment for our mothers, employment for everybody. So that's why we have to make sure the AFCFTA works, because it works for the whole of Africa. So what is the architecture or the structure of the AFCFTA trade agreement? It goes like this. The first one of the AFCFTA, first we have the agreement that is establishing the AFCFTA. We can say in layman's language is the constitution that is setting up the African Continental Free Trade Area. Then underneath that, we have the protocols. First, we have the protocol on trade in goods. That's where you find your rules of origin. Protocol on trade in services. That's where now we talk about our electricity, our tourism, how we're going to regulate. And then protocol on dispute settlements. And those were in phase 1. They're yet to be completed, but some of them are complete. Phase 2 and phase 3. Now the AFCFTA chief negotiators will now be negotiating the competition policy, the protocol on investments, the protocol on intellectual property, and the protocol on e-commerce. We all need e-commerce. We are here because of technology. We are reaching each other from different parts of the country, different parts of the continent and the world. How nice is that? Therefore, they were very smart at AFCFJ that now they will include the protocol on e-commerce. I talked about an annex, rules of origin annex 2. These protocols, they do have annexes under them and appendices under them. The rules of origin annex is annex 2 after the schedule of tariff concession. It has appendix 4 under it, about 4 appendices under it. So appendix 4 is the one that has the listed rules that you're going to talk about, our chapter rules, and then we have the listed rules, the exceptions that we have in that list. We'll talk about it next time when we now deal with the AFCFTA rules of origin. So you can see there are a lot of things that have been dealt with under the annexes of protocol and trading goods. That is to facilitate trade. And they even rolled in the trade facilitation agreement, which came into force, the WTO, the World Trade Organization trade facilitation agreement that came into force in February 2017. I remember the date very well because I was so excited. So, challenges of rules of origin. Yeah, you talked about rules of origin. You talk about that I need to know the identity of my products. Are there any challenges that you have experienced so far? First challenge is the one that I was talking about, the spaghetti ball, overlapping membership, which leads now to what? More work for the traders, more work for the customs officials, because now they have to distinguish between all these agreements. They say, oh, no, the trade is, no, this is ADEC. No, this one is SACU. Oh, okay, yes, that's the other challenge. The other challenge is there is need for competency. Thank you, Ron, for organizing this webinar, because we need to talk about these things. There's need to be competent on customs technical instruments. In customs, there are 3 pillars that we deal with. We have customs valuation, we have classification, we have rules of origin. Whether it's under trade agreement or not under trade agreement, in customs, we have to know where you are coming from. When people are queuing at immigration, goods are queuing at customs, also to identify themselves and to be treated accordingly, whether they need visa or they need passport only. So that's competence that you need to talk about and learn about and teach our traders, teach our young ones, and teach everybody. The other situation is the restrictive rules. They can distort trade. They can distort trade, and people now, okay, maybe I should relocate. I should do that one from that side, because now trade is no longer going the way it was supposed to go, because the rules are too restrictive and too expensive to deal with. Talk about too expensive. They may cause the products to be expensive, because now you have to comply with rules of origin. So you need input from a certain jurisdiction so that you don't miss your rules of origin. Don't be scared, you need them. You need to know rules of origin, because they are the backbone of international trade. You get to customs, we still have to know where you're coming from when you're a product. Mr. Cup, where are you coming from? I'm from China. Okay, you need a certificate of origin. Oh, you don't need it. No, it means we're going to charge you 40% then. All right. Now the impact. Makes them positive and negative, they're in the same thing. There can be a source of trade dispute, rules of origin, whereby now other member states are denying the other one preferential access for some certain reason, and they end up being in a dispute. So they can be a source. We are not saying they are a source, but we are saying they can cause disputes. And you cannot hide from that it does happen. Enforcement by customs may become a non-tariff barrier, resulting in delays in the border. This is my opinion, it's not anybody's opinion. The signatories that are deposited at the Secretariat, and the Secretariat has to move them to member states, sometimes there is communication breakdown in this movement of these signatories and the specimen. And we end up finding ourselves, a trader finds themselves in a situation that at the border, they've got to the border knowing that their goods have qualified and they are not going to pay duty. They get there, another member state X says, pay 50% for your goods duty before I can even charge you VAT. And then you find out that now that trader is in a situation that they don't understand, because the officers are saying we don't have a signature of this certificate. We don't have it in our list. So we have to ask. And imagine it's a Saturday. Unami is not there. She's not in the office. The verifications are done at head office, most of the countries. And now rules are becoming what? A non-tariff barrier. Still, when we talk about the delays and if we correct it as customs to take that. In every rules of origin annex, there's that verification mechanism that has been put, even at the AFCS SADC, there's an arrangement that you can raise your queries after you have admitted the goods, whether through a guarantee or whatever you have agreed with the trader, and then the verification can be done after, instead of now taking the issue to a dispute settlement where we are going now to be discussing a heavy arbitratory piece. So you can use the verification provision and trigger it. Is there in the AFCFTA as well, and SADC is there as well, ECOWAS, COMESA. I want to believe that it should be there because it's universal. We're still on impacts or rules of origin and trade facilitation in Africa. You'll find out that in these trade agreements, though we talk about the annex on rules here, they work together with other annexes. Take, for example, the one in the AFCFTA. They have dedicated customs, cooperation and trade facilitation and transit annexes to try and guide and ease the movement of goods. And they also have the non-tariff barriers arrangements and the tools there. All this is to facilitate trade. You can report the barrier, you can report the delay that you have in the border, and it should, if it works accordingly, it should report in real time to the customs official that is a focal person or the competent authority in the country where the query is being made to. They also have in these trade agreements, they have the elements of trade practices that are promoted in World Customs Organization and World Trade Organization instruments. You find that these agreements, especially the AFCFTA, is a more modern trade agreement. There are a lot of things that are benchmarked and try to use as many instruments that ease trade as possible. In the AFCFTA, they have a provision for e-certificate, electronic certificate of origin. So it eases the movement of goods. If all the member states will afford to have that platform to exchange the certificate electronically, there will be no issues of I didn't see your signature. It's not in the list. Because customs officials do get transfers, and sometimes information can be delayed. So the AFCFTA catered for that situation and say, let's put in the electronic certificate of origin. Recommendation or mitigations that we can think about. Countries should put in place national laws that facilitate the use of electronic and self-certification. There's something that we call self-certification in rules of origin, whereby you write an origin statement. AFCFTA, like I said, AFCFTA is a modern agreement. They have that provision where you are allowed, If I'm a small business, a tsunami, I'm selling under a tree, or I'm just distributing goods that are originating in Botswana, and I put my small mouth there, you know. Yes. So they give you the threshold where you can make a statement instead of going to buy the certificate. And I talk about this, I think about something else. So we also have to make sure that we distribute the regional offices as much as we can within the country, so that we ease the trade, so that the trader does not travel from Johannesburg to Cape Town to get a certificate of origin, or from Johannesburg to Pretoria to get a certificate, or from Gaborone to Francistown, you know, or from Abuja to Lagos just to get a certificate of origin, because that's where they are issued. So we need to spread as much as we can to ease and facilitate trade. Allow the procedures that we find in the trade facilitation agreement, the advanced rulings. So national laws should allow for advanced rulings, so that we rule before the goods get to the border, and do the pre-arrival clearance as well to facilitate the trade, instead of saying when you come to the border, now you get the shock of your life that now you have to pay 50 or 60% duty that you did not budget for as a trader. Countries can develop online tools that support administration of rules of origin to register their exporters, their products. And there's a very nice tool that is it UNCTAD or WTO and ITC and WTO, yes, International Trade Center and the World Trade Organization and the World Customs Organization. They've prepared a tool that is known as the Origin Facilitator. I'm so fascinated with that one. You just Google and say Origin Facilitator, it will come out. It will teach you a lot of things. The agreements are there. You pick it, it gives you the duties and all. That's the things that we need to put in place for the AFCFTA to work, for our regional agreements to work. Let's go and do something and teach our traders how to operate it, and have some stalls for them to be able to assist. We need continuous capacity building for stakeholders, including customs officials. I must admit, as customs officials, we also need that training to understand the agreement, so that when you come to the border, I know there is AFCFTA, and how should I treat the AFCFTA goods? Because if you don't do that, what happens? The customs official doesn't know anything about AFCFTA. The goods get to say, what are you talking about? What is AFCFTA? Because they've not been taught, they've not been capacitated. So let's capacitate our officials. That is a recommendation from my side. Customs can use post-clearance audits based on perceived risk as opposed to inspections at the border. There's what we call post-clearance audit in customs. Instead of making everybody to queue from the gate to the last part of the road, it's better we now start administering the post-clearance audits, where we allow goods to get in and then we audit them. And then we can collect duties accordingly. If there was an error or a mistake was made, we didn't collect, or we over-collected, then we fix it from the post-clearance audit, instead of say, open the truck, let me see, pull them down. Pull them down. Yes, that's what we don't want. We are recommending that to facilitate trade on rules of origin. Don't let them pull them down, pull them everything. Allow them to get in, then we can do post clearance and do the verifications after that. With that said, it's a thank you from me for your attention. And what I did not mention is that I have my mentor here, Mr. Kawelo Mawana. So during questions and answers, you might find he will be chipping in to assist.
Okay, wow. Thank you so much, Unami. That was a wonderful presentation. I think after today, most people who are attending here will be experts on rules of origin. You have really broken it down to the bone, and thank you very much for that. I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions when the time comes. But you know, we underestimated the time. But what we'll do is I'm going to ask Sandra to maybe just chip in into her part. to deliver that. And then Sham, please feel free to immediately after Sandra, just pick in, give us your thoughts on, you know, what you think and how rules of origin affect you and so forth. Sandra, thank you and welcome as well. I think you're muted, Sandra.
Thank you.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes, loud and clear.
Okay. Good evening, everyone, once again. Sandra from Zimbabwe. I'm going to be looking at rules of origin from a customs perspective. Thank you so much, Unami, for your wonderful presentation and the theoretical part. Now I think I'll have to look at the practical issues. The next slide. My presentation is going to look at how trading is done under the various regional trade agreements. I'll also look at the responsibilities that are assigned to importers and exporters in the various countries and how they can complete certificates of origin, the roles of customs in regional trade agreements, as well as how we can help SMEs in trading, because most of the trading that we are talking about, the formal certificate of origin, they are usually for those formal companies which are duly registered, but to the disadvantage of the SMEs. So I will touch on the SMEs, though to a small extent. For companies to be able to trade under regional trade agreements, they are supposed to be registered, and they should be registered with the designated issuing authorities. And designated issuing authorities, they can be in the form of customs administrations, they can be Ministry of Trade or Chambers of Commerce, depending on the country. But in this presentation, I will be mostly focusing on customs administrations as the designated issuing authorities. So registration is supposed to be done in the member states in accordance with the national legislation. So it's the legislation of the member state. For example, if you are registering in Zimbabwe, it's done in accordance with the rules and legislation of Zimbabwe. So who qualifies to be registered under regional trade agreements? Those who qualify are companies which are involved in manufacturing. Like Unami mentioned, one of the rules of origin looks at the criteria is sufficiently worked products. So those products are the ones which will be manufactured in the member states. So companies who are involved in manufacturing, they are registered. They qualify to be registered under the regional trade agreements that we have on the African continent. Then also there are companies who act as brokers or distributors. Even though they do not manufacture anything, they are involved in the export of locally or wholly produced goods in certain member states. So the rules, the registration process is flexible enough to include those companies. Then what are the minimum requirements for a company to be registered under a regional trade agreement? There are various requirements that countries look at, but the minimum are the company which requires to be registered under a regional trade agreement is supposed to apply in writing, and they apply in writing to the customs administrations. And they should apply well in time before they can export. It does not make much sense for one to apply today, yet they want to export tomorrow. They should give customs enough time for them to carry out their inspections, for them to carry out certain verifications, for them to be able to prove that the goods are wholly originating in a member state. So they should apply well in time. And the applications should include the name of the company, their physical address, their contact details, and the contact persons from that company. And they should also state the products that they intend to export. Then there are some other additional requirements that customs may ask for. For example, they can ask for the lease agreement of the place where one is operating from, or title deeds, so that they will be able to carry out routine inspections for them to be able to certify that goods are originating in a member state. Next slide. Then after one applies to be registered under a regional trade agreement, customs carries out inspections to verify whether there is any manufacturing which is taking place at the company that is applied for registration. Because there are cases whereby someone applies to be registered, they allege that they are manufacturing, yet they are not doing anything, they are just importing maybe from China. Then they put labels made in Zimbabwe, made in so-and-so country, and they are not doing anything. That's why customs is to verify that there is manufacturing which is taking place. So during the inspections, customs checks on manufacturing capacity of the company which needs to be registered. They also check on whether you have machinery to manufacture those products. They also check if you have any raw materials that you have which show that you are able to produce the final product. Then we also check on the final product that comes out of that manufacturing process. When customs is satisfied that goods are locally originating, the exporter is issued with an approval letter. And on that approval letter, there will be a registration number, which is unique to that company. It cannot be used by any other exporter. And for your own information, registration number differs with different regional trade agreements. Like Unami mentioned, we have different trade agreements. So when one is registered for COMESA, they will have a COMESA registration number. If they are registered under SADC, they will also have a unique SADC registration number. So whenever the exporter is exporting under that trade agreement, they should endorse on the certificate of origin the number that has been assigned to them. If the goods fail to satisfy origin criteria, then the applicant is not registered. That's how customs operates in terms of inspections. Then how does one prove origin of goods? Goods that have been accepted as meeting the requirements of the rules of origin are entitled to use a certificate of origin. That is the passport for the goods. Just like individuals use those national passports when they're traveling to the other countries, the goods which are being exported are supposed to be accompanied by certificates of origin. So the certificate of origin is issued by the designated issuing authority, and in most cases, exporters buy certificates of origin from maybe their chambers of commerce or Ministry of Trade in the various countries. It depends from country to country. The certificate of origin is supposed to be attached to the goods that are being exported, and in turn, they should be attached to the import goods declaration in the receiving country. So in trade, there are two parties, the exporter and the importer. So the exporter is the one who completes a certificate of origin and makes sure the goods are exported to the other country, and the importer benefits by using that certificate of origin coming from the exporting country. This will enable customs authorities of the importing member states to grant preferential tariffs to the imported goods. So if one fails to provide proof in the form of a certificate of origin, then customs will just apply MFN rates, the normal tariffs that are used. So what is the obligation of the exporter? Yes, you are the exporter. What are you entitled to do? What are you supposed to do for you to be able to benefit, for you to be able to be competitive by exporting under regional trade agreements? So the exporter is supposed to ensure that the products that they are seeking a certificate of origin for have been approved by customs. and they are supposed to complete the certificate of origin for each shipment. It is the responsibility of the exporter to complete the certificate of origin and not any other party to complete that. Both the exporter is the one who knows the manufacturing process, is the one who knows the raw materials that have gone into the production of a product. So they are the ones who are supposed to make declarations. They are the ones who are supposed to certify that these goods, they are wholly coming from this company. There are no foreign components which have been included beyond the required thresholds. So they are supposed to quote their registration number, the one that I said is unique to an exporter and unique to a trade agreement. They are supposed to attach a certificate of origin to the export bill of entry. That's the export declaration form. It should accompany the certificate of origin. The export declaration, together with the certificate of origin and other supporting documents, are supposed to be submitted to customs for export. So when we are talking about other supporting documents, we might be having packing lists, might be having licenses or permits or CD1 forms, depending on countries. Those documents which are accompanying the consignments, they are supposed to be also accompanied by the certificate of origin if the importer is to benefit from preferential rates. The exporter is also required to keep adequate records. For example, records of purchase of raw materials, bills of entry for customs purposes. Then one might ask, how do I go about completing a certificate of origin? Is it a difficult task? Should I assign someone else to do it for me? No, it's not difficult. The exporter is the one who completes the certificate, like I mentioned. He is the one who declares that the goods qualify as originating. If they make an incorrect declaration, the exporter would have committed an offense under customs law and is liable to a penalty. Goods are supposed to be described in accordance with commercial practice, and they're supposed to give sufficient detail to enable them to be identified, to enable it to be easy for the customs officials to identify those goods. And declarations, like I said, they are not supposed to be completed by third parties, but by the manufacturer of those goods. Then how does one submit a certificate of origin to customs? Customs are very friendly people. Customs officials are the best people I've ever seen. They are not rude, they are not rough. You sign your certificate of origin, you send it to customs, they sign your certificate, then they endorse with an origin verification stamp. There's a particular stamp which is identifiable in all the member states, where the signatories would have been submitted, like my sister Unami mentioned. So they will just have to verify those signatories with the ones that they'll be having at the customs offices. After this, when customs has stamped your certificate of origin, there's no any other body which has to endorse that certificate. That will be the end of it. Then you need to attach the original copy of the certificate has to be sent to the importer. That's the other person in the importing or receiving country. Then the duplicate copy is retained by customs. The triplicate copy is for the exporter's records. So when customs comes to visit your premises, you have exported, you can show them proof of export using your triplicate certificate of origin. That's the one that you are entitled to keep. Customs will be keeping the duplicate of that certificate of origin. So what does customs do in the importing country? That's the receiving country. The importer must present the following to the customs administration: certificate of origin. Then they're supposed to, sorry, this is a bit faint. I don't know if the audience can see this. I can hardly read. I can hardly read. Can you see what's on the screen?
It's fine. I think you may just talk to it, Sandra. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, much better, thank you. The importer must present the following. That's the certificate of origin from the exporter, then the bill of entry or the declaration form. Then they should also submit those supporting documents that I mentioned. That's the invoice, the packing list or permits, whichever they are. Then the customs authority is supposed to, I can hardly see this. Maybe I can share on my screen, if possible.
Okay, I think if you know the content, you may just proceed talking to it whilst you try and share, yeah? Because I don't want you to lose your tempo.
It's okay.
Momentum, Sandra, yeah. So you may proceed, yeah, notwithstanding. Thank you.
All right, so the customs in the importing country, they will have to check the goods that the importer would have imported. They check against the description on the certificate of origin to see if those goods are the ones that the customs in the exporting countries have signed for. If those goods are really originating from the exporting country. So if they are satisfied that those goods are originating from that exporting country, then preferential rates will be granted. So for example, if the MFN rates are, let's say 40%, and maybe under COMESA or SADC, the preferential rate is maybe 10% or it's duty-free, then you can enjoy those rates because you would have satisfied customs by presenting the required documentation. Then, like I mentioned before, I'll briefly look at how SMEs or informal cross-border traders are catered for under regional trade agreements. There's the simplified trade regime, which is operating under COMESA. And that one, at the present moment, it's in 3 countries. That's Zimbabwe, Zambia, and Malawi. Those are the countries which are making use of that STR regime. So this one is meant, or it was meant to allow the informal sector to take part in regional trade. Because like Unami mentioned during the presentation, international trade can be quite challenging. It can be quite, the customs clearance processes can be quite cumbersome. They can discourage especially those informal cross-border traders from taking part in regional trade. So in order to simplify the customs clearance process, the customs STR regime was introduced. And like I mentioned, it's currently between Zambia and Zimbabwe and Malawi. So in this case, traders don't necessarily need to carry that certificate of origin, the one that I've spoken of before. They will find a simplified certificate that they complete at the port of exit. And at that port of exit, there's a list of goods that are admissible under that simplified trade regime. And that common list of goods is the list that is agreed between those two member states. And they will just complete the simplified certificate, and it has a maximum amount of value that is placed on it. You cannot export goods which are more than $1,000 US. So in most cases, our informal cross-border traders, they are the small clients. They usually export small consignments. That's why it was pegged at USD 1,000. That's the current value that's placed on it. Thank you so much for listening to my presentation. That's all I had today. If you need to contact me, those are my contact details. Thank you for the opportunity to share with me my presentation. Thank you so much.
Wow, Sandra, thank you so much. Thank you. That was absolutely amazing. I'm glad that I saw that there's a lot of business people on this platform today, and that's very exciting because I think most of our businesses on the continent right now need to hear more and more of this, because I'm of the view that, for example, currently on the continent, businesses are not talking to each other. The states which are the champions of the AFCFTA seem to be in their own train, and the business people are sitting in another coach on the train, and we need to get this dialogue going to simplify a trade for everyone. So thank you very much for that, Sandra. I'm sure there'll be questions later, but colleagues, I just want to take track of time as well. I know that our webinar was supposed to end at 8, but the way we're going, we can't. We will push till about 8:30, whereafter we will have to close. So I would suggest that if you do have questions in the meantime, you start posting them in our message box, in the chat box. We can read them to the panelists later on. But of course, we will also listen to Mr. Mawana after Sham has made his input. Sham, I think the bar has been set very high. What are your thoughts on rules of origin? And thank you once again for coming through.
Thank you very much, Ronnie, and a big shout out to Unami and Sandra for the fantastic job. I could read the two positions, which were theory and implementation from the custom point of view. Now, one part of the stakeholder is left, the importer and the exporter, who talks on their behalf. And I will take from where Sandra ended by saying that the rules of origin negotiating forum has considered a more simplified cross-border trade regime, integrating the informal sector. Here, where it's really a big appreciation from our end to see that apart from certificate of origin, the negotiators of the AFCFTA provided an opportunity for a declaration or a producer-supplier declaration that can be used, which is a simple doc paper where you take up an A4 paper and you write on it to ascertain that you are the producers of these goods and you are shipping them to this country, and you sign. That will be endorsed by the custom official. But some of the issues that we are finding it difficult to take in as far as the AFCFTA is concerned is a designated authority who has the power to ascertain the originality of a certificate of origin. In most countries, custom officials have that mandate. And now when we look at formal and informal cross-border trade, formal cross-border trade does not suffer any issue because these are formal channels that are established, notably ports, airports, and railway stations. What about the informal cross-border actors, which accounts for a significant percentage of intra-African trade? Will these designated authorities be able to cover, for example, let me take DR Congo, which has about 240 borders. Will the designated authority be able to place officials at 240 borders, that's land borders, to be able to ascertain the origin of goods under the AFCFTA? So these are some of the issues that are being raised. And why not use an electronic certificate of origin in a digital era where we are foreseeing negotiating at the third phase, e-commerce on the continent? So these are some of the worries that shippers have been expressing. And again, we should be aware that it is not because we have a free trade area with zero tariff, but more complex rules of origin that traders will be forced to trade under the FTA. They might resort to continue trading under MFN, considering the fact that compliance with the rules of origin is a complex issue. And that is why the Secretary General of UNTAC, during the launch of Made in Africa, emphasized on the necessity of the rules of origin to be simple, transparent, and business friendly. So these are some of the positions that shippers have raised, and that we think in the implementation forum that we salute, there will be room for recommendation at the level of Accra and Ghana for amendments and consideration where there are difficulties of complying with the rules of origin. Now, if that is done, I would like to raise another issue with the procedure through export under the AFCFTA, the codification. Under the AFCFTA, it is agreed that a certificate of origin will bear a number, a code that has been issued to a particular producer, and that code will be reviewed on an annual basis. The question now is, what of a case where a producer is having different brands, for example, 5 brands, and under those 5 brands, 4 complies and are exportable, and one brand is facing a challenge of compliance, what will become of the code that was granted to that particular producers? Will the certificate of origin be completely canceled on other goods that are still eligible to trade, or will the particular brand that is facing challenges in compliance under the AFCFTA will be extracted while the other ones continue to be traded under the AFCFTA? So these are some of the worries that we receive in our capacity building forums with shippers. And I think my co-panelists, they should be able to consider this at their national level. And Sandra was calling on national implementation. That's true. It's a free trade agreement where implementation is done at national level. But the view of exporters and importers is that when 55 countries gather to negotiate, it is a forum for us to sort issues that can be sorted at the regional level, rather than sending it back to national level, not even at the level of regs, but to national legislation, which we know very well that 55 countries coming on board, maybe to harmonize a particular policy or legislation is quite a complex process. So Ronnie, these are some of the issues from the shipper's perspective. Thank you.
Sham, thank you so much. I like how you sort of, summarized everything in one in terms of what the challenges are, especially for your constituency. I think the framing of rules of origin, from what I pick up in today's discussion, is a very critical step towards having rules of origin that are not only simple, clear, and certain, for business people to use, but I think there's a number of challenges that are inherent in the framing of rules of origin. For example, one of our panelists spoke about the de minimis rule, which for example gives a tolerance, as it's called, tolerance level, to say we will consider this product to have originated from here if only it has a tolerance of, say, 10 to 15%, the de minimis rule we speak about. So what could happen is that some of the people with vested interests could negotiate to make sure that the de minimis rule is much larger, in which case it will defeat, the purpose of why, rules of origin exist. If I can just give you an example, in terms of trade agreements, how rules of origin can really build industries within a country. So the AGOA Act, the Africa Growth and Opportunities Act that the Americans had with Africa, gave African countries a waiver, in terms of goods coming from outside of Africa that could be imported to the United States. So as a result, there hasn't been any substantial and growth of African manufacturers as a result of AGOA that has been created. But if you look at the other hand, for example, the EPAs that the EU enters into with some of the countries, they require a higher percentage of locally manufactured content from African producers for them to qualify to be there. So the journey towards the Made in Africa label is only just beginning. And I think it's important to note that there's going to be a lot of integration that is required within the continent to make sure that we have, the right outcomes. Firstly, we need to have purposeful action in terms of, our governments and our leadership to make sure that we actually do want rules of origin that will accelerate manufacturing on the continent. There needs to be a serious alignment of all the various frameworks and policies. I can imagine policies around labor, industrial, macroeconomic policy, investment promotion, and trade facilitation policies. So we've only just scratched the surface in terms of getting to what rules of origin can be. But before I open up the floor, we have a guest who happens to be Unami's mentor, Mr. Mawana, Kauhelo Mawana, who is in Zambia and is part of UNCTAD, I am told. So you saw what he produced in terms of Unami. Her presentation was just mind-blowing. So I'm really keen to get an insight from him. Mr. Mawana, if you please, sir, if you can just give us your insight in terms of what was being presented today around rules of origin, I would be very grateful. Are you able to do that for us, Mr. Mawana?
Yes, Aaron.
Thank you,
I
sir.
will
Welcome.
just, I'll try to do what the little that I can try. Thank you very much, Ron, and thank you very much to Unami, Sandra, and our colleague from Cameroon. Indeed, all of you made good inputs in terms of what is happening with the rules of origin. My background is now mixed because I have done more than 20 years in customs as a customs officer in more than one country in Southern Africa. And I also was in charge of the file on AFCFTA rules of origin at the African Union Commission until the time they were adopted in the June 2019 summit. That is when I left for the UNCTAD, where I'm actually looking at trade facilitation in the COMESA region. So I think from the discussions that have been said, I don't want to dilute what our distinguished speakers have said. All I can say is that the rules of origin are evolving, and we also have to evolve and look at what works for the traders, what works for governments, what works for everyone, so that our economies can benefit when we administer this. Because rules of origin are simply trying to promote intra-FTA trade. We are trying to exclude others and promote ourselves. So if we can optimize on that, yes, we'll benefit. In any case, they are not a violation of the WTO rules. We are allowed to have preferential arrangements among ourselves. We look at what is happening recently. Of late, we have got three major agreements that reflect the revolution. The AFCFTA is one. In Asia, they've got this regional economic partnership, which they did, the comprehensive economic partnership. And the Americans, under the last administration, they revived the NAFTA. If you look at all these things, they are a major departure from the traditional rules of origin that we had. But we need now to accept reality. The COVID-19 has come in. It has brought in a lot of change in the way we do business. And no member states now can actually say, I will insist on a hard copy all the time, because people are not able to go to the office to submit the documents. So the issue of automated solutions is a major issue that needs to be embedded in the administration of rules of origin. Otherwise, we create a barrier before the goods even leave the exporting country. So the issue of automated solutions, the issue of promoting approved exporters. If an exporter can have systems which are approved by the designated authority, is normally customs, they can be allowed to actually say they will certify themselves, then customs can have periodic audits. So we need to promote those things that can be done at the business side of things, as opposed to relying with everything going through the authorities. We also need to take into account that for the continental level, for instance, even at regional level, there are now portals that are being built. Africa has got the Africa Trade Observatory, where we are going to have all trade issues concentrated there. Will that portal also take care of exchange of rules of origin certificates, signatures, and all other procedures? Those are the issues that we can build in. The agreement, the AFCFTA agreement, has got all those flexibilities built into it. So what we can say is, yes, we are in a world which has revolved so fast, especially with the COVID-19 pandemic. Therefore, we need to also quickly revise our situation and say, how can we do business? We still have to survive. And we need to make sure that our trade procedures are properly revised. We know that the AFCFTA, for instance, will be reviewed in 5 years' time. So I think traders and academics, everyone must start preparing to say, how better will it be in 5 years' time? For today, we can start, yes, but how can we make it better? So let me not take away a lot of time. I know we have got limited time, and having been a trainer in all these things, sometimes I can be too carried away. But I think the short of it is to say, let's build a scenario where we will see ourselves facilitating more trade, still applying the rules. The issue of transparency and simplicity, we need now to focus more on how can we educate people to comply, because rules are rules. You're not going to overspeed because you're going to hospital. You still have to observe the speed limits, you see. So rules are rules. We still need to live with them. Thank you very much, Ron. Let me leave it there.
Wow, thank you so much, Mr. Mawana. That was absolutely great. And of course, we're looking forward to talking to you more on the subject in the future. So thank you for that. We saw from your protege that yes, indeed, when you are a teacher, you are bound to sometimes say more than expected, because it's the nature of teaching to want to enlighten people. So thank you very much for that, sir. Colleagues, this is what we received today. I am very grateful for that. I am much more smarter than 90 minutes ago when I joined this webinar, and it's always a pleasure to learn from our colleagues in the various fields of expertise. Is there anyone who has a question, perhaps, who would like to, use the remaining 5 minutes to engage with the speakers? If there is, you can raise your hand, or you can chip in as and when you please. Okay, maybe let me do the first question. You mentioned, Unami, in your presentation that there's different types of rules of origin. But what are the bare minimum that these agreements should at least have in order to make sure that rules of origin are worth the paper they're written on? Please unmute yourself.
Sorry.
That's right.
The different types or different kinds of rules of origin, we're talking about the non-preferential rules of origin and the preferential rules of origin. The non-preferential, they're solely used for trade policy measures, where you do your trade statistics, where we find our data to know that the goods are from South Africa, from China, that's the trade data. And for origin marking, just to mark the product and say made in South Africa, made in Botswana, proudly made in South Africa, proudly made in Nigeria. That's just for non-preferential purposes and for anti-dumping or trade remedies, where we now have to put in a countervailing duty or to try and stop injury that is being caused by goods that are coming from outside. Then we put up a duty on that, on the products that are coming from that country, so that we discourage them coming, more of them. And then the preferential ones, now we are talking about the free trade agreements. We are talking about our AFCFTAs. We are talking about our SADC. We are talking about our EPAs, or we are talking about all these agreements that we have that are free trade. Then now we talk about preferential. That is now we are serious. We want to know whether you are coming from, because we're talking money. When you talk to customs officials, we're talking money. We need to know where the goods are coming, so that we don't waive a 4 billion duty for a good that was not qualifying to be waived that duty. So that is why we have the two of them. But most of the time we talk more about the preferential ones, because the non-preferential ones is as per the country where the goods are going.
Okay, thank you so much. Sandra, let me ask you something quickly. Being a customs official and the AFCFTA being, a freshly baked, hot off the press, do you think that sufficient, training is being given to customs officials in order for them to understand the AFCFTA and specifically rules of origin relating to the AFCFTA?
My frank response is, currently, most of the focus is on the private sector, and there's not much which is being done on the customs side. And I think the levels of awareness on the customs administrations, they're still quite low compared to what the private sector knows about AFCFTA.
Yes, so that is a risk, because I mean, ignorance in that regard could actually become a non-tariff barrier, if you think about it. Because if you don't understand, as someone said during the presentation, you may say, in terms of the AFCFTA, and somebody else, but what is that? I don't even know. So really, something urgent needs to happen in terms of not only the customs officials, by the way. Of course, I've mentioned earlier, a whole new narrative needs to be built around this issue of accelerating intra-Africa trade. Because if not, we will have this document like many other trade agreements we have. It will be shelved somewhere in a dusty corner, and 20 years from now, we'll be saying, we should have done it better. But thank you for that. Sham, I know that when you're a shipper, you cannot afford to, you know, queue forever in the port for you to drop off your goods. And therefore, the issue that you mentioned around electronic certification is very key for you guys. So are there any other things outside of electronic certification that you, as you know, in the shipping industry, think would be helpful in accelerating intra-Africa trade?
Yeah, thank you, Ronnie. Actually, as my predecessors have mentioned, capacity building is the common denominator across the whole continent. It is important to highlight here that countries like South Africa, Egypt, are countries that are versed with trade agreements. And when you look at the EPA, South Africa is making quite a good deal out of it. But when you look at other countries, the rate of utilization is still very low. For example, EPA is getting to its 7th year, and yet we can't really indicate an increase in trade because information is not disseminated. Shippers are not aware because these are technical issues. And in most of our countries, when we sign agreements, shippers are not consulted from the onset. This is one of the key issues. The AFCFTA was signed. Many in African countries were surprised to notice that on the 21st of March, 2018, Africa was signing a trade agreement, and even industrialists were asking themselves, what is a trade agreement? And remember, Ronnie, that's why Nigeria could not sign on that same day, because the Nigerian private sector said, you cannot sign an agreement that concerns the private sector, and we are not aware of it. Nigeria had to backtrack, carry out serious consultation process, and capacitate its private sector. 1 year later, they signed on to the agreement, and ratification was done even by pressure from the private sector. They said, we are the people to trade. So we are the people to actually tell you which tariff lines are favorable for us and which rules of origin will be able to favor Nigerian businesses. So it's a common denominator on the continent. Capacity building is key. And one of my friends was asking me a few days ago, so if I buy Chinese product from South Africa and ship to Cameroon, will they come duty-free? That I sent him this link. I told him, please listen to this webinar on rules of origin. Yes. It is not because you bought the goods in South Africa, yes, which are automatically South African made. Please, you must be careful. In South Africa, the Chamber of Commerce or maybe the Custom Authority must issue you a certificate of origin. And if they refuse, please understand that your goods are not South African made. Yes. So these are some of the issue. And again, in the debate, I further went ahead to explain to him that a good that has a combination of 5 state parties of the AFCFTA qualified under rules of origin of the AFCFTA. Because some might be asking, Kenya has signed, ratified, and deposited. If I take raw material from Kenya, from Zimbabwe, from Egypt, and assemble my product in South Africa, is that eligible? Yes, of course, it is eligible because all these are state parties to the AFCFTA agreement. So these cumulative rules of origin do work for state parties which have signed on to the agreement. So training basically at all levels, be it custom officials, even officials of the ministries of trade and industry in our countries, they need a capacity building on free trade agreement. And I think, Ronnie, to round up, we need to reform our ministries of trade and other ministries. Our ministries are calculated on the colonial approach 60 years ago, where they just have some classic department. Today, you'll find in many countries, you won't find a department for trade negotiations. You won't find a department for trade facilitation, which are new concepts that have emerged. Even a department for e-commerce. In most countries, you won't find this. And how do you want them to have an understanding of the concept of free trade agreement, which is basically new post-1995 when the WTO was created? So capacity building is very, very important. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Sham. Before we sign off, Mr. Mawana, we have the AFCFTA. Everybody was excited. Africa is finally doing something. And then next week, Kenya is signing an FTA with America. Then the week after that, you know, somebody else is signing. So there's still all these signings going on, irrespective of the AFCFTA. How will this impact on rules of origin, insofar as these various, outside of Africa, arrows come into play?
Okay, that's a very difficult one, but I'll try to recap from what I've seen during my time at the African Union. we should recall that those are decisions that are sovereign. Countries can make sovereign decisions, but those decisions may impact on the continental initiatives or regional initiatives. For instance, as we sign the AFCFTA, we expect everyone to rally behind that, and we see industrialization and all that happening. Then when another country signs, say with America or another country outside Africa, there is that feeling that maybe that agreement may undermine our own initiative, to the extent that if you look at the decisions of African Union summits, there are at least 2 summits where that was reflected, where the African Union summit, our heads of state discouraged member states taking such initiatives with third parties while we are still organizing the AFCFTA. There is also this idea that shouldn't we get to a point where we speak with one voice as Africa? But for now, if it happens, it means at operational level, customs have to now apply those different agreements for different goods, where there is possibility of that agreement being easier to use than maybe the other one. Obviously, we'll see more goods coming in. But what I can say is, from the legal point of view, the AFCFTA has got a provision which says where a country in Africa, the AU member state, signs a third party agreement with an outsider, then they must make sure that whatever they give to the outsider is equally given to the African member states. I think that's our current, I think that's where we can start from now, to say if that can be applied, it means, okay, duty free for other countries outside Africa, then make sure that duty free is also given to us in Africa. That would be our starting point. Then we can go from there.
We need a common African approach, one voice, made in Africa. That should be our future as Africans going forward. Colleagues, just to round off, we received messages. Thank you. This was a great presentation. And someone said, actually, thank you for the excellent presentation. And that's precisely the, the sentiment that I echo. Thank you very much, colleagues. We are eternally grateful. Let's keep the conversation going. If you have any questions relating to the issues raised here today, we are available to assist you. The webinar link will be sent to the people that were registered to the webinar. And of course, it will also be on YouTube sometime latest early tomorrow. So thank you, colleagues. My take from this is that Africa is on the right track in terms of what it wants to achieve in terms of accelerating intra-Africa trade. The AFCFTA is a new agreement which is currently being rolled out, and many of its annexures and so forth are still up for negotiation. The issue of capacity building came out very strongly from this webinar today, and I suppose in all the webinars we have. And it is for that reason where I say that Africa as a whole, really, we need, a story to tell. And it must start with us building our capacity to understand what trade is about and so forth. The issue around information sharing is going to be very critical in the management and implementation of trade agreements. We need to be clear, certain, and sure of what goods are or are not allowable in terms of the AFCFTA. And that is going to be the issue around technical, training for customs officials, very key. Because in fact, Sandra, as you were talking, talking about the declarations and what they contain, I was actually asking myself that would a typical customs official, really understand where this good comes from just by looking at the documents that I handed to him. So it tells me that it's a highly, a technical environment that requires that. And of course, not only do the customs official, not only do the business people, but also the ministries need capacity building, as Sham put it in his conclusion. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much once again. Thank you, Unami. Thank you, Sandra. Thank you, Sham. Thank you, Mr. Mawana. We are absolutely blessed to have you here today. And like I said, we will be in touch. The conversation continues. And thank you very much for sharing your time and your knowledge and expertise with us. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And until we meet again. Thank you, colleagues, and walk back safely to your dining room or kitchen, wherever you're walking to. Have a wonderful one. Cheers. Goodbye.